In the trial of Sean "Diddy" Combs, no one expected the next witness to be wearing a navy blue suit with a badge hidden under his lapel. But when former FBI agent Mark Halperin stepped up to the stand, the room fell completely silent. What he revealed was more than just a scandal. It was a network, a system of protection so deep it reached the highest office in the United States. Yes, he named Barack Obama, the man many saw as a symbol of hope, now tied, allegedly, to parties, pardons, and protection involving Diddy. According to Halperin, the real reason Diddy stayed untouchable for decades had nothing to do with good lawyers and everything to do with being useful to the powerful. What followed was a testimony that linked politics, religion, the music industry, and a silent network of control that had been building since the 1990s. The courtroom was packed, but no one was breathing. Not when the back doors opened and a man in a dark suit with a briefcase stepped in. No name was announced. No credentials were read aloud. The judge simply nodded. That was the signal. This wasn't just any witness. This was someone who had operated in the shadows, someone with access far above what any journalist or private investigator could dream of. He was referred to only as Special Agent Redacted, a high-ranking federal agent who had worked for decades within the FBI's organized crime and political corruption divisions. And today, for the first time, he was testifying under oath about one man, Sean "Diddy" Combs. The agent sat down, opened his briefcase, and placed a black folder on the witness stand. He didn't look at Diddy, who sat stone-faced at the defense table, his fingers clasped tightly. He didn't look at the jury either. He simply said, "I've been tracking Mr. Combs and his enterprise for over 2 decades. This is not new. What's new is that we're finally allowed to talk about it." The judge motioned for him to continue. The agent testified that the FBI had opened initial inquiries into Sean Combs as far back as the late 1990s. "The red flags were always there," he said. "We had financial transactions that didn't make sense, private parties that overlapped with known trafficking networks, overseas connections that led to criminal shell corporations. And yet, every time we moved closer, the doors slammed shut." The agent described a specific instance in 2001, an international sting operation on money laundering involving a Bad Boy Europe affiliate. Evidence pointed directly to Diddy's financial teams, overseas accounts, forged invoices, and shell companies in Luxembourg and Belize. But when it came time to request warrants, the order was denied. "That was the first time I realized," the agent said, "we weren't just dealing with celebrity protection. We were dealing with federal interference." Whispers filled the courtroom. "I don't mean to sound conspiratorial," the agent continued, "but this wasn't a case of local police getting scared. This was top-down, Washington-level people telling us to stand down. Files went missing. Witnesses were relocated. Investigators were reassigned. At first, we thought it was coincidence, but it wasn't." The prosecution then introduced a timeline of blocked investigations, dating from 1999 to 2013. Every time Diddy was linked to criminal activity, from trafficking to assault to wire fraud, there was either a key witness who disappeared or a federal delay that froze the investigation. One juror looked visibly stunned. A woman in the gallery gasped and covered her mouth. Then came the bombshell. "In 2003, the agent said, we had reason to believe Mr. Combs was operating under unofficial informant protection, the kind that's not registered in public logs. That kind of protection only comes from very high up. And at the time, there were only 3 people in the federal government who could have authorized it." The room froze, and Diddy looked like he knew exactly who those people were. Special Agent Redacted leaned forward and cleared his throat. "This is where the story shifts," he said, "because it's not just about the crimes committed. It's about who allowed those crimes to continue. And that brings us to Mr. Combs's relationship with political figures at the highest levels, specifically Barack Obama." The courtroom fell into a stunned hush. Even the judge raised his head slowly, Eyes narrowing, the agent opened the black folder again and held up a series of photographs for the jury. The first was a grainy image from 2005, Diddy standing beside then-Senator Barack Obama at a fundraiser in Chicago. The next was from 2007, a private off-the-books event in Washington, D.C., hosted by a powerful lobbying group with close ties to the Democratic National Committee. Diddy was listed under an alias, but the photo made it clear. He was there, and he wasn't alone. These were not just photo ops, the agent explained. These were meetings, closed-door sessions. We believe Mr. Combs was involved in intelligence-sharing operations with campaign operatives, trading favors, leaking information on others in exchange for protection. The defense jumped to its feet, yelling, "Objection!" before the agent could finish his sentence, but the prosecution calmly handed over corroborating exhibits, travel logs, email metadata, even a redacted internal memo that referenced a cultural liaison meeting involving BO and high-value entertainment assets. "Here's what we know," the agent said, his voice growing firmer. In 2009, shortly after Mr. Obama took office, our bureau submitted a wiretap request targeting Sean Combs. The purpose? To intercept communications between Mr. Combs and several known narcotics traffickers who were laundering money through bad boy-affiliated production companies. The request was denied. The courtroom stirred. "Denied by who?" the prosecutor asked. The agent flipped to the final page in the folder, a call log from a White House-affiliated legal office. The name redacted, but the timestamp matches the exact moment our request was pulled. The judge asked the jury to disregard any speculation, but the damage was already done. The implications weren't subtle. The timing wasn't accidental. A man under federal surveillance had somehow gained enough access to the White House that he could stop a wiretap. Cold. "We're not alleging President Obama personally protected Mr. Combs," the agent clarified, "but we are saying his administration created a pipeline, a relationship. And that relationship effectively gave Mr. Combs immunity for years." Reporters scribbled furiously. Even the stenographer paused for a moment before continuing. This wasn't a case of Diddy being lucky. This was calculated, engineered, enabled by power far greater than anyone had anticipated. And that was only the beginning. The jury was leaning in now, eyes locked, pens forgotten. Special Agent Redacted had cracked open a part of the trial that no one, not even the boldest reporters, had dared to predict. But what came next shifted the entire courtroom's atmosphere from curiosity to dread. The agent held up a final image. It wasn't grainy. It wasn't secret. It was a high-resolution photo taken at a private function in Martha's Vineyard. In it stood three men: Sean "Diddy" Combs, former President Barack Obama, and Reverend Al Sharpton. They weren't posing for press. This wasn't a public event. It was a dimly lit gathering on private property, an estate owned by a tech billionaire with ties to both the entertainment industry and defense contracting firms. This was taken in 2014, the agent said. They called it a charity dinner, but we obtained the guest list through court-approved channels. What we found were names linked to multiple sealed investigations, former CIA assets, arms dealers under sanctions, and representatives from TriStar Entertainment. Whispers erupted again. The judge slammed the gavel. "Order," the agent continued. Mr. Combs wasn't there as a guest. He was a conduit, delivering information from the streets of New York to the marble halls of political power. And in return, his sins were forgiven. A juror dropped their pen. Then came the story that made even the judge's eyes narrow. In 2012, the agent said, a trafficking sting was carried out by the Miami field office. A known associate of Mr. Combs was caught, red-handed. Girls, drugs, offshore wire transfers. It was the kind of case that makes headlines. The agent looked up, eyes heavy. 48 hours later, the file was sealed. The agents were reassigned, the suspect was released, and the case disappeared. How? The prosecutor asked. The agent didn't hesitate. A phone call came in from a Capitol Hill extension. That's all we know. No name, just one phone call. And everything vanished. He then handed over internal memos, emails from baffled agents, warning of interference. One line stood out, the agent noted. It said, "Don't ask why this got buried. Just be glad you're not in the room." Then came perhaps the darkest revelation. There was a period in 2015, the agent said, where we monitored Mr. Combs's movements closely. He traveled to Haiti, then to Colombia, then to private islands in the Caribbean. At first we believed it was recreational, but intel from foreign partners suggested otherwise. Meetings with cartel-affiliated financiers, yacht parties involving underage girls flown in from Brazil and Eastern Europe. One source even claimed the girls were told they were attending an American Idol audition. By now, the jury looked visibly shaken. The agent closed the folder. All this time, he wore the mask of a mogul, a philanthropist, a revolutionary. But behind the curtain, he was running an empire built on fear, blackmail, and immunity bought with influence. The judge called for a recess. People filed out of the room slowly, many in stunned silence. And for the first time since the trial began, Diddy looked like a man who realized the walls were finally closing in. By the time court reconvened, the spectators had grown quiet, subdued. It was no longer just a music mogul on trial. It was the illusion of safety, of equality, of justice. Special Agent Redacted resumed his testimony, his tone heavier now. What he revealed next made the courtroom visibly stiffen. "We have reason to believe," he began, "that a cache of surveillance tapes from various Combs-owned properties existed, dating back as far as 2003. We know this not through speculation, but because some of those tapes briefly passed through federal hands." He clicked a remote. A projector displayed a screenshot, a frame of time-stamped footage from a surveillance room in one of Diddy's Los Angeles homes. This image was leaked to us by a whistleblower from a now-defunct private security firm hired by Combs. The room contained upwards of 30 monitors, each linked to a different location. Bedrooms, hallways, pools, private studios. Many of the cameras, we learned, were hidden, and the people being filmed did not know. Murmurs rose from the crowd. "Now, here's where it gets darker," the agent continued. "In 2016, we obtained a warrant to seize 3 hard drives believed to contain this footage. But when agents arrived at the designated property, a fire had broken out in the server room. Arson was confirmed. The timing, less than 20 minutes after our field office received clearance, suggests an internal leak. Someone warned them." He went on to describe the one surviving drive, miraculously recovered from an associate's safe deposit box in Puerto Rico. That footage, he said, showed interactions between Mr. Combs and various celebrities, business people, and political figures in states of extreme vulnerability. Some appeared intoxicated. Others were clearly coerced. "Was Barack Obama in those tapes?" the prosecutor asked bluntly. "He was not. But," the agent said, "several close friends, donors, and political allies of the administration were, and Mr. Combs was heard referencing them by first name. He knew their secrets. He kept the tapes as leverage." The court fell silent again. The agent then said something that would haunt the proceedings. "In the end," he said, "Diddy didn't just collect these recordings to satisfy his ego. He used them as currency, insurance, in case someone tried to cut him off." That night, major networks broke the news. But in private, in hidden rooms across DC and LA, crisis teams scrambled to ask the only question that mattered: how much did he really know? Court resumed the next morning under heightened security. Federal marshals lined the walls. The atmosphere was different now. The kind of dread that only comes when the rot has spread far beyond its origin. Special Agent Redacted returned to the stand, carrying a sealed envelope. He asked the judge to open it privately. Inside was a classified memo bearing the letterhead of an agency not usually mentioned in courtrooms, the Central Intelligence Agency. For the record, the agent said, this memo was declassified specifically for this trial. It was originally authored in 2012 by a senior analyst within the CIA's Domestic Operations Division. The subject line, Entertainment Assets, High-Risk Targets. The judge nodded and allowed him to summarize. Beginning in the mid-2000s, Mr. Combs was identified as a high-value cultural influencer with potential for domestic manipulation. He was flagged by multiple departments for his associations with known arms traffickers, offshore bankers, and intelligence-adjacent figures in Eastern Europe and West Africa. The agent paused to let that sink in. The CIA did not formally recruit Mr. Combs, he continued. However, they benefited from his proximity to people of interest. His events, his parties, and his influence offered a goldmine of behavioral data. In exchange for plausible deniability, Combs was allowed to operate with little to no legal interference. "Are you saying the CIA let him do these things?" asked the prosecutor. "I'm saying," the agent replied, "that the agency found his operations beneficial. They may not have sanctioned his crimes, but they certainly overlooked them." The next part was even more damning. The agent held up a notarized ledger. "This document," he said, "contains a list of wire transfers made by shell companies affiliated with Combs, including several routed through TriStar Entertainment and other entities tied to Britney Spears' conservatorship structure. The recipients? High-level political consultants, lobbyists, even an individual connected to a Caribbean human trafficking case that mysteriously vanished from the DOJ's docket in 2015. The implication was clear. Diddy was not a lone monster. He was part of a well-funded, tightly controlled circuit of influence peddling, blackmail, and covert information warfare. The question now? How many more names are in that blacklist file?